This podcast is sponsored by Murgitroyd, intellectual property attorneys. For more information on today's guest and our company, visit murgitroyd.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the 7th season of Murgitroyd's Innovation Talks podcasts. We're delighted that more and more of you are choosing to join us. If you have any questions, you can email us at innovation.talks@murgitroyd.com or contact us via Twitter @Murgitroyd. And please remember to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. So let's go straight into today's podcast.
Hi there, I'm Elaine Taylor-Shaw. I'm a patent scientist at Murgitroyd, currently working in the York office. And I'm delighted to say that I have Director Wendy Crosby here, who's going to give us some information about patent scoring for your IP portfolio.
Hi there, Elaine. It's really good to be with you, and I think this is a really interesting subject to have a chat about. As you said, I'm a director in the patents group at Murgitroyd and have been through this type of process on a number of occasions with different clients, so really looking forward to getting into some of the specifics with you.
That's great. Well, I've got a few questions, so let's crack on. So I think the main thing is, how do you actually decide on what to patent? How does a client actually get to that final decision?
I think that's one of the things that for many different clients, there's lots of different reasons why they would be looking at developing an IP portfolio. It could be, for example, that they're looking to attract investment into the company. It could be that they're looking to grow the company, to keep other competitors out of a marketplace so that they can have a monopoly for a period of time in terms of what they're doing. Basically, though, I think a lot of it comes down to increasing the value of the company, because intellectual property is a very valuable resource for companies, and it's one of the things that can be used to measure the value of a company. The more IP that it has, if you were looking to sell the company, for example, you'd be looking for a higher price. So for a lot of companies, decisions on what to protect and how to protect them, and particularly where to protect them, can come down to the available IP budget that the company has, and making sure that they're using the IP budget available to them in a reasonable way that still fits in with how the company plans to grow and what it's looking to achieve from it.
Yeah, that's great. I understand that one of the major factors is obviously cost, especially to an SME or even individual inventors and things like that. So I think today, because both of us are part of the patent group at Murgitroyd, and because patents tend to be the most expensive intellectual property out there in general, this is why we're having this discussion. How do you go about deciding what to patent and what not to patent in terms of giving this particular idea or invention a score in terms of how to proceed?
Absolutely, Elaine. And I think also particularly for SME companies, as you mentioned, once you've got a couple of patent applications in your portfolio, it's really important to manage the portfolio to make sure that you don't end up using up your IP budget on things that you don't actually want to be spending the money on, that leaves you with no budget available to do something else that will achieve a better result for your company. And that's really where patent scoring comes in. And it's something that I think any company should incorporate into their IP management strategy, whether it's an SME, whether it's an individual who's got one or two cases, or right up to multinational companies who have enormous IP portfolios. Because what can often happen is you find out 5 years down the line that you're paying fees for cases in Nigeria, but you've never actually sold any products in Nigeria. You've got no active leads. You're never going to have a licensee, but someone thought it was a good idea to protect Nigeria when a decision was being made. So this type of process of ranking patent cases, looking at what's important for one company as opposed to another, is really good to look at doing at an early as possible stage in order to make sure that you don't get into those kind of issues.
Yeah, and I suspect it's something that companies should be doing fairly regularly to sort of assess where the company is and maybe reevaluate their IP portfolio and decide what's more important, as you said, filing and having protection in Nigeria or filing a new application in the UK.
Absolutely. And I tend to recommend that companies look at their IP portfolio at least once a year. The larger the company, it's quite good to sit down with a group of people that are involved in making the decisions so that everyone understands where the company's going, where the new technology is coming from, why the company thinks that technology is important. And you might have your most important core technology today, and in 5 years' time, the industry might have moved on and that core technology is no longer relevant. But having the patent protection when you had it hopefully gave the company a step forward that they wouldn't otherwise have had. But it might be that that original set of cases might no longer even be the core technology of the company anymore. So understanding that and having a regular review is essential to good management of an IP portfolio, particularly as it grows.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you touched on there about, reevaluating the patent portfolio at least maybe yearly is probably more important for smaller companies, because they might have had a decision to file applications just purely to get investment initially, and it might not be of any value now because they now have that investment and have been able to grow, and their focus has changed in terms of what IP that they want to have in their portfolio.
Absolutely. I mean, decisions change over time, and, all of these things are important for the company. And I think it's also important to remember there's no one size fits all when it comes to this type of a review, because what's important for one company will be very different for another company. But making sure that the company understands why they're reviewing their portfolio, what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, and then being able to assess whether the patent cases that they have are actually working towards that result at the end of the day, or whether there's cases that are no longer relevant. I've had some clients, for example, who in one review have had a very heavy focus on a particular technology in their IP portfolio, but perhaps they've sold that part of the business by the next year, or their largest customer has gone somewhere else, or the company focus has changed and suddenly that part of the portfolio doesn't have the same relevance to the company's overall aims and goals as it did a year ago. So being able to quantify that in a way that makes sense for the company is something that is really important to do, and it doesn't have to be overly difficult or overly onerous.
Yeah, definitely. And the way that companies put a score or put a value to things can vary greatly just depending on the company and, as you said, and their goals and things, whether it's core business or for investment opportunities.
Absolutely. And when I've done these types of processes and reviews before, we'll normally sit down with the company in order to understand what is their core technology. If they've got 5 or 6 patents, is there one patent family that if they had to focus an IP budget on above any others, that would be the one that underpins everything? So even just being able to rank patent families against each other. And some of the ways that clients do that, or businesses do that, would be looking at, for example, are you currently selling the product or operating the process? So are you making money back on the basis of what you've already spent for the case? But also things like, is the case granted for that patent? Or is it still an application? Because obviously, once you have a granted patent, the value for that patent can be higher to the company than an application, because you have something tangible at that stage that you could take a competitor to court, for example, in order to stop them from infringing. So looking at some of these different strands, I would normally look at what state in the patenting process has their IP reached. And I would give cases a score of, say, perhaps, and it could be different for different companies, but perhaps 1 to 5. 1 being, we haven't filed an application yet, but we've identified it's a technology area that's important. 2 being, we've filed an application, but it's not yet been searched or examined. 3, we've filed it and it's been searched. 4, we've filed it and it's been examined. 5, it's granted. So you can very quickly start to see for every patent in a company's portfolio, you can give it a score based on where it is in the process. And that will start to give you an idea, if you had to start thinking about your IP budget, which of these is more important, which ones would you put before others. You can then start looking at things like, do you currently have customers that are buying that product from you? And you might have a score again between 1 to 5, depending on, we've never had anyone come and ask us about it, we've got active leads, we're currently in talks with someone, or we have a licensee and we're getting money back at the moment. That's another set of numbers that you would have in your table. You might also have an interesting one, I think, is it keeping a competitor out of the market? So are we getting sales that if we didn't have the patent, we might not be getting? Again, you can put different scores onto that. So you can start to see different layers that you can build up and end up in a situation where you have an idea of which are the cases that are most important to the company compared to those that are nice to have, but wouldn't be the ones that, if the house was burning, that you would necessarily be looking to save.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Wendy. And I think it's given people good food for thought, and your examples on what type of things that you could be scoring in terms of your IP portfolio and things like that. You're talking about reviewing patent portfolios for things that are already in progress. What happens if there's a company who's at the initial research and development stage and they're not really too sure how the technology might progress? So how would you do that?
I think that's also a really good point, Elaine, because I don't think this type of scoring system should only be used for companies who have already filed patent applications. But I think it could also be used where you've got companies that have got technology that they're working on that may in time become a patent application. And one of the things that I've used with companies in the past is looking at, for example, is the technology proven? Or is it something that it's an idea that's come out of the R&D group, but you know that you're going to have to spend quite a large amount of time and money getting to a point where you need to see if it works in the way that they expect it to work? Or is it basically sitting on a shelf ready to go if someone pushes a button? And again, with these types of scoring systems, you can have a lower number for something that is an idea that's come out, but we've got a lot of work to do in order to prove that it would actually do what we think it will, compared to we've gone through everything that we need to do in the review process, and actually the technology is ready to go as soon as we want to release it. So that type of thing, again, can form a big part of this scoring system, even when you've not filed a patent application yet, because that might be something that's very important to avoid the company focusing a lot on something that is a lovely idea, but might take half the company's resources to get to a point that you can prove it works, compared to something that you know that you could go with today and be getting a return back that's increasing the value of the company today, to allow you to then go back to these blue sky thinking type ideas that would perhaps be better in a longer term strategy rather than shorter term.
That's great, Wendy. I think that's quite a good point there to when companies are reviewing their R&D budget, say they should be thinking about their IP portfolio at the same time. Thanks very much. And it was good speaking to you. And I think that's given a lot of information to people out there who are thinking about reviewing their patent portfolio. So thanks.
It's great to catch up, Elaine, and a really good, interesting topic to speak about. I think there's a lot of issues there and a lot of things that different companies will find useful and interesting, because it's really important for anybody looking at the IP sector to make sure that they're able to balance the IP that they have with the budget available and to be able to focus on the best thing to deliver the results that they're looking for. So thanks. Good to catch up with you.
That's great. Thanks.
Thanks for your time today. We hope you found today's podcast valuable. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. So until the next time, goodbye.
Our business is founded on trust and collaboration. The subjects we choose for our podcasts are topical and informative. We are always looking for suggestions for new topics for discussion, so if there's an area of IP that you're keen to understand better, please drop us a line at innovation.talks@murgitroyd.com.